The fire in Coal Bunker. The fire in Coal Bunker number 6. Even before the Titanic cleared the docks in Southampton, a massive fire was smoldering deep within one of its hull compartments. This wasn't a small flame, but a slow-burning inferno in a 3-story high coal bunker that reached temperatures of nearly 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. For days, the crew fought the blaze in secret, shoveling burning coal into the furnaces to clear the space. The intense heat significantly weakened the adjacent steel bulkhead, which happened to be the very wall meant to keep the ship afloat if it took on water. When the iceberg struck, this compromised steel likely buckled much faster than it would have otherwise, turning a manageable leak into a catastrophic flood. The use of low-quality, wrought iron rivets. When builders constructed the Titanic, they required over 3 million rivets to hold the massive steel plates together. However, because of a shortage of high-quality steel rivets at the time, the builders used lower-grade iron for the curved sections of the bow and stern. These iron rivets contained high concentrations of slag, a byproduct that makes metal brittle and prone to snapping under extreme pressure. Metallurgical tests conducted decades later on recovered wreckage showed that these rivets simply couldn't handle the force of the collision. Instead of the hull plates holding firm, the rivet heads popped off like buttons on a shirt, allowing the seams to unzip and let the ocean pour in. The mirage and atmospheric refraction. On the night of the disaster, the Titanic was sailing through a cold core mirage caused by a phenomenon known as superrefraction. Cold air from the Labrador Current moved under the warm air brought by the Gulf Stream, bending light in a way that created a false horizon. To the lookouts in the crow's nest, the sea appeared to blend seamlessly into the sky, hiding the iceberg behind a hazy belt of light. This optical illusion effectively masked the dark mass of the ice until the ship was less than a mile away. By the time the bridge crew realized they weren't looking at a clear horizon, the distance was too short to maneuver the massive vessel out of harm's way. The missing binoculars in the crow's nest. In the frantic shuffle of crew assignments just before departure, the ship's second officer was replaced, and he accidentally took the keys to the crow's nest locker with him. This locker contained the only set of high-powered binoculars intended for the lookouts. Consequently, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee were forced to rely entirely on their naked eyes to scan the pitch-black horizon. While binoculars might not have spotted the iceberg in time under all conditions, the lookouts later testified that they could have seen the danger much sooner with the proper equipment. In a situation where seconds determined the fate of thousands, the lack of a simple glass lens was a devastating oversight. The steerage and the complex interior design. While the iceberg caused the damage, the interior layout of the ship played a major role in why so many people failed to escape. The Titanic was designed as a floating social hierarchy, with gates and winding corridors specifically built to keep third-class passengers separated from the upper decks. During the sinking, these passengers found themselves trapped in a labyrinth of flooded hallways with no clear path to the boat deck. The lack of clear signage and the sheer distance they had to travel meant that by the time many steerage passengers reached the top, the lifeboats were already gone, turning a mechanical failure into a human tragedy. The SS Californians ignored warning. Only a few miles away from the Titanic sat another ship, the SS Californian, which had stopped for the night due to the heavy ice field. Its captain had sent a direct warning to the Titanic, but the message was dismissed by the Titanic's wireless operator, Jack Phillips, who was overwhelmed with backlogged passenger telegrams. Later, as the Titanic began to sink and fired distress flares into the air, the crew of the Californian watched them from the horizon. They misinterpreted the signals as company signals or fireworks and failed to wake their wireless operator. Had the Californian responded to those lights, they could have reached the sinking ship in less than an hour, potentially saving everyone on board. The high speed in a known ice zone. Captain Edward Smith was under immense pressure to maintain the White Star Line's reputation for punctuality and speed. Despite receiving at least 6 different warnings about drifting ice, the Titanic continued to steam forward at nearly 22 knots, which was almost its maximum speed. The prevailing wisdom among captains at the time was that if the weather was clear, ice would be seen in time to avoid it. This overconfidence meant the ship was moving far too fast to turn effectively when the Iceberg was finally spotted. The momentum of 46,000 tons of steel moving at that velocity made the collision unavoidable the moment the ice appeared in the dark. The S-shaped turn command. When First Officer Murdoch spotted the Iceberg, he gave the order to turn hard to starboard, while simultaneously ordering the engines into reverse. While this seemed like the logical way to avoid an obstacle, it actually hindered the ship's ability to maneuver. A ship's rudder is most effective when water is flowing rapidly over it. By reversing the engines, Murdoch reduced the flow of water, making the Titanic's turn sluggish and heavy. Additionally, the attempt to port around the Iceberg, essentially trying to swing the back of the ship away after the front cleared, caused the ice to scrape along the side of the hull for 300 feet, opening multiple compartments to the sea. The brittle fracture of the steel plates. The steel used in the early 1900s was the best available at the time, but it had a chemical composition that modern engineers would find alarming. It contained high levels of sulfur and phosphorus, which made the metal become extremely brittle when exposed to the near-freezing waters of the North Atlantic. When the Iceberg struck the side of the Titanic, the steel didn't just dent or deform. It shattered and cracked. In warmer waters, the hull might have survived the impact with only minor damage, but in the icy cold, the metal acted more like glass, allowing the Iceberg to easily slice through the protective skin of the vessel. The expansion of the watertight bulkheads. The Titanic was famously called unsinkable because of its 16 watertight compartments, but this title was based on a flawed design. The bulkheads that separated these compartments did not extend all the way to the ceiling. They were open at the top. The ship was designed to stay afloat if any two compartments, or even the first four, were flooded. However, the Iceberg's long glancing blow punctured the first 5 compartments. As the bow began to sink, the water in the 5th compartment simply spilled over the top of the bulkhead into the 6th, much like water filling an ice cube tray. This domino effect meant that once the first few sections were lost, the rest of the ship was guaranteed to follow them underwater. The Titanic wasn't sunk by one mistake, it was sunk by 10. And the most terrifying part, any one of them fixed in time could have saved 1,517 lives